Over to you, Mel.
Okay, welcome everybody to this session, Older or Elder, presented to you by the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs, and there's three co-founders on this call: myself, Chris Underhill, and Andrea Coleman. For those of you who are not aware about the background to the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurship, we started over 2 years ago, following a conversation we had probably about 2 years prior to that, about the issue of social entrepreneurs reaching an age of retirement. And we hated the word retirement, particularly given the determination of individuals who are getting into older age to continue their passion for social or environmental change. So we've, cut a long story short, created this organization, and it's beginning coincided with the beginning of the pandemic. And during that time, we've done a lot of work, which have included a number of webinars where we've had speakers from all over the world talking about this issue of eldership and what that means. And we've talked about issues around succession planning, around exit strategy, around boards. And we've learned a great deal about the way different cultures and different countries look upon this. And certainly retirement is not a word that's there. And going forward, we look to, you know, how you create system change related to that. So that's why it's so important, actually, we're having this discussion during Catalysing Change Week, because the Catalyst 2030 is all about system change, how we create the system change rather than working as small groups of individuals or small organizations, but battering our head against a brick wall. How do we create change collectively and achieve the SDGs by 2030? So being here actually makes complete sense to us, because we believe that the elders, or those older in the community, actually have something really to contribute here towards that. And the discussions, as I say, we've been having on the webinars have been very, very insightful. So what we have today is a discussion around elder or older or elder, because you can say it both ways around, I think, in terms of what we can contribute and how we move forward. For this session, there's the usual rules. And so put yourself on mute. We're very keen to hear what you have to say. So you've got a function where you can stick your hand up. There's also a chat function. So please, we're very keen to hear your questions or indeed comments or your own views on the issue. As the three of us discuss this together, please put those in the chat. I'm very keen to hear you, and starting now even. So maybe just in terms of beginning this, from the Catalysing Change Week point of view, we're keen that you know, we hear from you, so some of the email addresses that we may not have in terms of the Elders Council. So if you don't receive our newsletter and would like to, please put your name in the chat, and Caitlin, who's on the call, will make sure that you get the newsletter. The other thing, the important thing to say here is that in terms of the rules of this session, is that it's being recorded, and it will be used, and not only by the elders but also by Catalysing Change Week. So if you don't want to be part of this, then please say so as quickly as possible. But once again, that's one of our general rules. So maybe just this brief introduction I've given just now, maybe if I could ask Chris and Andrea, during the past a couple of years, we've had a lot of discussions and a lot of fabulous speakers. What's been your highlight, you think, or what has been one of the key takeaways that you've had from the webinars that we've had?
Chris, shall I have a go?
Yeah, please do.
Please, Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mel, very much indeed. I think it's also important to say, in addition to what Mel has said, that although Chris, Mel, and I started the Elders Council, we really believe that everyone is part of the, everyone who is both an elder and a younger is part of this group, because, you know, we all hope we'll all get to be elders. And it's how then you think about yourself, your own self, how you think about your organization as you move forward, how you prepare for that, both for yourself and for the organization. And it's part of the sustainability of social enterprise as a whole to make sure our organizations go on well and healthily. So I think that, as Mel's already said, hearing from you all is more important than anything else, just to hear what aspect of elder or older really speaks to you. So I'll hand over to Chris before we go on to ask you more questions from the floor.
I think one of the things that has really struck me as we have got into this into the whole question of elders has been the way in which different parts of the world view eldership. And so the whole question of culture and eldership has been really interesting and very important. And so in some parts of the world, you know, I think older people are struggling to get their voice heard. And that means that behaving like an elder becomes just that much more difficult, which I think is, you know, an important point to make right away. And in other parts of the world, eldership seems a little easier because the older people are more recognized as being important to the community in themselves, so having wisdom, in fact. And so at its best, eldership then becomes recognized as being part of wisdom. And that, I think, is really, you know, very, very attractive from my perspective. And so that, Mel, has been one of the things that I have really noticed as I've gone around. And I've got lots of lovely examples of that, if that's helpful at some point. If I could say one other thing, Mel, if that's okay. The other thing which I've noticed is that as we approach this subject of eldership, and we start to look at different organizations and different themes and subjects, you know, whether it's the question of gender or the question of climate change or the question of sustainability, for example. Of course, we find that there are people in all of those fields who are reaching an older age and are beginning to plan what they do next in their lives, whether they're going to remain with their organization or not. And so being an elder or eldership is very intersectional. It's not about being from one particular subject field or another. It's all different subjects. And so therefore, if you accumulate that into the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs, for example, which we are, if you accumulate that, then you find that you have wisdom from all different kind of angles, all different sort of situations. And that, I think, is really attractive about the question of eldership. Back to you, Mel.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think I agree. It's been really fascinating to hear how this issue is perceived in different parts of the world. But I think one of the key things for me is that there's a certain loss to the sector, if you like, if social entrepreneurs, usually founders, build organizations and then move, and then all their wisdom and all their insights are actually lost. So actually, how do you preserve all that learning that's been gained by those individuals in a collective sense that then can be applied in a wider sectoral sense? And I don't think that issue has been looked at, certainly not within the sphere of social entrepreneurship in the sectors. But I do agree with you. It goes across all areas, so anti-poverty, sustainability, whatever, mental health, whatever issues going on, it's the same one that appears. So what role, therefore, do older people who kind of don't like the word retirement, or it doesn't exist actually in their vocabulary. What's their role, and how can they actually be of value just to achieving these wider and higher objectives that we all strive for.
But
so I think I agree with you strongly on that point. Sorry, Andrea.
No, sorry, Mel, I interrupted. I was just thinking really that, of course, it's important organisation-wide and to the sector, but I also know that it can be very painful. People often put off thinking about succession and moving on in their organisation just because it's very difficult to contemplate. And often I think, you just imagine you're always going to be there as the leader. And it can be very painful for individuals. I know I found it very painful in the past. And so I think one of the other functions of the elders is to be here to talk about, how you feel about moving on, or how you can move on. What are the elements to moving on? What support do you have from your board? Is it a financial issue? Is it an emotional issue? Is it all of those things? So I just feel that this is about organizations, the sector, and also very much about the individual and how they feel. I wonder if there's anyone who wants to interject at this point, just to hear from you who've joined what your particular focus or interest might be in this issue of older or elder.
That'd be good to hear.
If there's anyone ready to speak. As you can imagine, Mel, Chris and I can certainly speak forever if that's what is required, but it would be great to hear from you, and perhaps when you're ready, just put your hand up and say so. We'd be delighted to hear from you.
We're very, very keen to hear, but I think one of the things that because I think you put your finger on some of the key issues there, Andrew, on a kind of personal level for all of us who are who are founders or leaders. But what I found really great in terms of the webinars was just how honest people have been actually about their own circumstances. So whilst they've been maybe holding things into themselves, but getting into this space, I actually felt much more comfortable to discuss the challenges that there were. And there are real challenges that you can learn from. So, not getting on with boards, for example, is one that was quite common. So how does a founder who's put all that emotional energy into building something hand it over to a board that maybe they don't quite see the same connection with that board? But it might be that objectively, sustainability of the organization is absolutely fine. So the person's done the job, but it's not answering the emotional question of where they lie, particularly if they're passionate about still creating change.
And then there's the other aspect, though, Mel, when you think about what is the right time within an organization for a founder or a CEO to move on. And I've given that a bit of thought about, if you're in a social enterprise, your whole function is about systems change. And is it the right move on when you feel confident that the systems has changed and you don't need that founder with the passion and drive to put it in place, that's been done, and you can hand it over to people who really can manage that going forward? And it's a question I'm very interested in, is when is the right time for founders to move on?
You have a view, Chris? Is there a right time, or is it just down to individual circumstance, do you think? Everybody's different, so there's never a total right time?
Well, I personally think the question of when you move on and in what manner you move on is central to the whole question of eldership. There's no question about that. I've been aware of a number of different circumstances in my own life. I have usually given quite a lot of notice, about a year's notice, and then have moved on after about a year. And that's been helpful to the board because they've been able to think about replacing and so on and so forth. But I've always been able to move on quite simply from the organization which I've been managing and which I founded, and have moved on to do something else, and that's been fine. I wondered though if we could just go back to the question of culture for a minute. We have with us Mahadi. Mahadi, hi. I know that you have been one of our speakers in the past. And I wondered whether you would kindly just comment on the way in which people in Lesotho think about eldership, because that seems to me to be, quite fundamental to the way in which we think about ourselves as elders. So I wondered whether you would like to give a comment on that, Mahadi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes,
Hi there. Welcome.
Thank you. I think it's a bit tricky. I know that even as you talk about civil service or in general, people, I think in our country it's difficult because there's no provision for looking after the elderly once they leave their workplace. So there's always that anxiety when people are about to leave. They don't know what the future holds for them, how they are going to be able to feed themselves or even maintain whatever commitments they have. So, but there's a lot of pressure because the level of unemployment is very high, and the youth are now pushing so hard for elderly people to leave the workplace and give space for them because the government is not doing that for them. So, and it's unfortunate because in some areas it gets to a level where there's some disrespect, and because people think they have a right to be in the workplace, and people are pushing more and more for the retirement age to be reduced so that people can leave the workplace quickly. So I think the dynamics are different because there's no social provision for people when they leave work. So people are scared to leave, but the youth are not making it easy also. But I think it would be important for people to consider both, because for me, I value the experience from the people who have been doing, and I prefer gradual handover so that people can understand clearly what they are taking over, and people understanding that they don't know everything, and so I don't know, it's a bit difficult for me to say, but this is the situation in our country.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Thank you, Mahadi. That's very, very helpful, very interesting as well. And I was wondering, Mel, whether we couldn't ask one or two other people as well what they felt about eldership in their own part of the world. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I'm very interested to hear. I'm sure we all are. So if anybody wants to stick a hand up or put something in the chat, that would...
Addy has her hand up. Yeah.
Great, fantastic.
Hi, I'm just gonna put my camera on. So
hi, Addy. Good to see you. Welcome.
Hello. So I have a social enterprise, well, a non-profit in South Africa called Heartbeat Clowns, and we essentially are we upskilling unemployed youth, primarily to teach them the skill of therapeutic clowning. But the truth of the matter is, what I've noticed in my country is that when you get to a certain age, I started my social enterprise when I turned 50. Now 54, and I found it increasingly difficult that people take you seriously as an older person, going into driving social change, because most of the funding and the opportunities are left for people up to the age of 35. In our country, a lot of opportunities are given to what they classify as youth, which are which are people up to the age of 35. So that includes accelerator programs and things like that. Sorry, my dog.
I don't think your dog wants you to be on here, but we want you.
She doesn't want.
No,
Sorry
I think the dog wants to be on there.
He wants to be on the Zoom call. So yeah. So what I'm. It's so funny. He's always quiet except when I come onto Zoom. So what I'm saying is that I think that there's a gap in our society that isn't really catering for people who to become social entrepreneurs in the elderly age. And you know, I experienced it personally, you know, on my personal experience, that you know, because the work that we do as therapeutic clowns actually also addresses the elderly. There's a thing called elderly clowns, which works with the elder sector, who, you know, people who have dementia or people in old age homes. So the gap, I just find there's a gap in terms of being able to address something with a social impact. The youth are always covered for, and children are always covered, but the elderly, there's always seems to be a gap in terms of what is being offered to them.
So do you feel then that there's a waste of going on? There's older people then who have actually a lot to offer, and it's just going nowhere. And
yeah,
so,
like Mahali said, I think like Mahali said, the thing is, people are being forced to retire earlier now, at 55. I'm talking about, I can't talk about other countries, but I'm talking about in South Africa. People are even encouraged to take early retirement. But a lot of elderly people, you know, are still, their brains are active. They are still able to contribute to society. And I think that there's a gap, and it restricts elderly people from contributing as social entrepreneurs in the old age, even to be role models and possibly to be mentors to younger people, because they have a wealth of knowledge in terms of business as well.
And how do you think it could be? How do you think it could be changed if that's the prevailing attitude? Is it that coming from government talking about early retirement, or is this just what's happening culturally? Because
it's not only government. Yeah, I think it's not only government. I think it's just it's an you know, the retirement age at some companies it's 60, some places it's 62, 63, and even that is very young for people, because a lot of people who leave at that age still want to have a purpose in life and still want to be doing stuff and are able to contribute. But there's no well, I didn't know about this your organization before, but I mean in our country there isn't anything similar to that addresses the elderly people, well, people who, you know, a group from 55 upwards, who may want to still be contributing and making a social impact.
It seems so that the Elders Council and Catalyst 2030 and groups within the organisation could start to make a bit of a noise, really, about the fact that older people are both relevant and also to be respected, but have a huge contribution to make. And it seems that there's a role for us to play. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely true. There's definitely a role to play for people 55 and up, and I think that sometimes it should be restricted to you know, to people. I mean, you know, it's funny. Funding is given. If you're up to 35, you can register for accelerator programs or startups, or, you know, for social enterprises. But once you're over that, from 35 to 55 and 55 up, you're in a bracket that is, it's almost like no man's land. That's there's no one looking after or catering for that age group.
Yeah, and it's interesting that what Mahadi's saying is that people have a fear of retiring because they won't have enough funds to keep themselves going. And another side of that is that you're saying is that people have a contribution to make and people aren't recognizing or respecting that. So these are two very important points that you're both making.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder whether we can invite Farita to give a comment. Farita, do you have a view that you'd like to share on this question of eldership, or on the question of the use and wisdom of elder people? Are you there, Farita? So, Caitlin, you had your hand up.
It was just to join on to what Adi was saying, that as well, and a couple of other people, as well as older people saying, you know, we need to recognise the value in the community. I think younger people need to also start raising their voices and saying, I need these mentors, I need these people to feel valued, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel when I come to make a difference, because they've already done so much that I can learn from and build on. So it's valuable for everyone. It's really valuable for younger people, but they just need to be educated about that and realize that these are untapped resources.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, Caitlin, because one of the speakers, if you remember, I don't think he'll mind me quoting him, Rick Aubrey, felt that when he was working with young people, sometimes that they can feel almost that they're being disrespected because they should know everything, and that, you know, and that it's time for him to move. And so, you know, I agree with you that it's very important for the younger, you know, for youngers to be thinking about how old elders can be, how we can best, what's the best role for the elders that can contribute to what youngers are doing.
Yeah.
Certainly the idea of some sort of mentoring with Catalyst 2030, I think kind of makes absolute sense to me. But just back to the Rick Aubrey point, quite interesting, because I try to think about my kind of my younger self, and you know, if there was an older person being my mentor, would I have paid any attention to them? And part of the thing about the younger social entrepreneurs is they're not prepared to take the normal path, and they want to create things and do things differently, and they work really hard and bang their heads against brick walls, and that's what makes them up. So in some ways, from a personal point of view, you know, maybe it would have been very helpful to me because I'm typical of a social entrepreneur with lots of mistakes going in the past. I haven't actually had a mentor and listened to them, but would I have listened is the question. So the issue about how there's a nuance about where elders sit, I think, in relation to mentorship. It's not let's have a mentor, but what sort of mentorship? Where does it sit, and how much of an intervention is it in support, or is it just kind of a very light hand on the tiller, and you know, kind of like if there's a problem, you suddenly go, I'm going to speak to my mentor. So where that all sits, I think that's kind of important. I'd just be interested in your view, Caitlin. Is that something you agree with, or am I just talking about my own situation?
From my point of view, I like to think that I'm not too unusual in being a younger person that respects the wisdom of older people. I think the problem is with social entrepreneurs, they do work so hard and they do bang their heads against brick walls, and you think, surely we can make it easier for people. You know, you're trying to make the world a better place, and all these people have already had this experience and know the funders and know how things work. So it would be better if we worked as a community. You know, it's kind of like talking about raising a child. It takes a village. You know, why are you trying to do this by yourself? But I think there is an element of what Kat said in our previous webinar. I actually have it written here. One of her roles is to be a community elder, to be the Queen Mother, and being the Queen Mother doesn't mean you're in charge and you're the head queen. It means you pray for, nurture, and encourage the now generation of leaders, the kings and queens. So in that, she wasn't saying, I'm going to be your mentor and I'm going to tell you what to do. She's there to encourage and see the potential in the people that are coming up behind her, which I thought was really inspiring.
I think that's a fascinating quote. I remember her actually saying that when in that webinar at the time at the Elder, so the role of an elder is not only to be a mentor, although of course that is a possible role, but I think another role is to be an encourager, and to basically be there to encourage, to cheer, to lead, to cheerlead, and generally be available. And sometimes, of course, that then becomes mentoring, and sometimes it becomes introductions to somebody else, and so on. It can be a number of different things, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Paula, did you want to comment on the whole question of your buddying and mentoring that I know you're thinking a lot about at the moment?
No, it's just very much connected with what Jeroen said in the chat as well, that there is this acknowledgement that elders and people with experience have the possibility to add value to any project, any collaboration. So we have heard more and more that need, no? But yeah, it's very much connected with what also Kathleen said and some in the chat.
Great.
I think it's a really, really interesting area. And I think, again, looking at culture, because it goes back to what Kat had said in that quote. I remember in one of the earlier sessions, we had discussions about how older people who were leaving social enterprises were perceived in India, I think, and talked about how they actually left the leadership role, but always stayed in or close to the organization. And it was described like a tree, so that the tree grows and the branches and the elder provides the shelter under which the new leaders grow further, grow more trees, etc. Which I thought was really interesting in that example whereby in India everybody's valued. It doesn't matter how old or young you are, you're valued and you're part of the growth of that organization. Whereas in the West, we are still very much, if you've got to a certain age, therefore you've got to finish. Doesn't matter that actually in this day and age, we're much healthier than we ever have been. And as older people, actually, we've got a lot to offer. And so in the Indian example, it's kind of going like, why are you doing that? In the West, or why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. So I thought that was a very interesting insight, and similar to what Kat was saying, maybe that's something we can learn from and apply to any potential mentor program that might go forward with Catalyst.
But really, as leaders at any stage in an organization or in life, your job really is to listen and sort of support new leadership forward, and to listen and help people to reach their own decisions about where they're going to go, rather than you telling them where they should go. So I just think that part of this is about a new conversation, in a way, about how you move forward right from the beginning of an organization, how you work with developing new leadership, how you support new leadership once you've moved on. And then, of course, there are the financial aspects that Mahadi raised early on. I wonder if there's someone.
No, but isn't it, Andrea, can I just kind of ask about this? Sorry, I mean, it's about succession planning in a sense, isn't it? But in some ways, some social entrepreneurs, leaders, founders, they're not very good on the succession, because actually they don't really want to move, because they're so emotionally wedded to what it is. So how do we influence that in a way so that people don't feel threatened, so that actually people do have a role going forward, and there is the emergence of decent succession planning that allows new leaders to emerge. That's one of the challenges, isn't it?
Yeah, that is I think that is the big challenge. Yeah.
I wonder whether we could invite one of our new guests who just arrived to comment. Welcome, Lenny. Nice to see you. And thanks for joining us. And thank you, Al Hassan, for joining us, and Chantal as well. Very much appreciate your being with us. The conversation at the moment is discussing the whole question of elders, the way that the community sees elders, and of course, how elders can relate in terms of the organization that they are perhaps leading or that they're part of. Chantal, did you have any comments that you'd like to make at this point?
No, I'm a late arriver and I'm listening in, so thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And where do you see the whole question of eldership? How is it for you?
You know, I think, turn this on. I think my perspective is, you know, maybe a little different. I don't know, given my work and where I work. And I mean, right now, I'm trying to get groups and people focused on empowering older people and seeing their value. And, you know, from my perspective, the cases I see, the interactions I see, I think there's a lot of disrespect, of course, but I also see with older people a lot of playing small. And I think that's a direct result of society and the way they're treated and viewed. And I'd like to see that change. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And Chantal, what is there a very brief description about your work? Is that relevant to? I'm sorry, I don't know your organization, so a very brief description of that.
I work for the Iowa Attorney General's office, and I handle cases involving older Iowans, largely abuse, reports of abuse. Can be anywhere from fraud to family abuse. And I head up, we have a 170 member coordinated community response team, and I lead that team. That's multidisciplinary and focuses really on systemic issues. So, you know, fascinating. I don't necessarily, I rarely hear good stuff. So that's always my perspective is I hear the bad things. Nobody calls me to say things are going well. So I try to remember that. Yeah,
that's really helpful. Your perspective on it is really valuable. Thank you for telling us.
Very valuable.
Thank you.
Do have a look at the chat, Chantal, because we've got information about our organization, the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs. Now that's not for everyone, obviously, but it might be of interest to you just to have a look at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Could we ask Alison, have you any particular view on eldership that you'd like to share, Alison?
Okay, thank you so very much for having me. Greetings from Ghana, West Africa. I'm sorry for being late. Okay, I think first and foremost, I would like to recommend you for this particular session, and I am hoping next time majority of the people will have to join because it's a great session. Yes, what just came to mind is that eldership in other perspective, people might think eldership is someone who is old doing something for the nation, but it just came to mind that eldership means that someone who has something impactful, an experienced person who people might learn from to impact humanity as a whole. So that is my eldership. So eldership necessarily doesn't mean it is total aged or someone who is aged, but it is talking about someone who is experienced, who has more knowledge and skills for others, for young ones to, you know, to learn, imitate from, to impact humanity towards the SDGs. Thank you so very much.
Caitlin.
Thank you.
Caitlin, you had your hand up there.
No, I was doing the clappy emoji.
Oh, okay.
I was agreeing.
That's really interesting, Alassane, about you seeing it as to do with wisdom rather than with age. And that's a very helpful view as well. These are all amazing perspectives that you're bringing in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very fascinating. And it was really interesting to hear Al-Hassan on the one hand and Chantal on the other. That was a very interesting contrast and perspective, which is really important, obviously. Yeah. So where are we, Mel?
We're in, as usual, Chris, we're in the middle of a very interesting conversation. As is ever with webinars that we do, there's so many different perspectives that come in here. I guess one of the issues that we maybe should talk about in a moment is, how do we move on here? So we are collecting a lot of information, and as Al-Hassan just pointed out there, there's wisdom around. So how do we capture this wisdom and put it into some kind of order that would actually be beneficial for everybody? Because I think Alassane is absolutely right there, and that's how we will influence a growing system and how we'll get to hitting the SDGs. So how do we do that? We've spoken before in our webinars about codification, collecting the information, streaming them into different sections and so on. I'd be interested in kind of views on if that's the way to go, and how do we spread this? Or is it just as simple as, right, okay, let's get a mentoring system that's sensitive and effective at Catalyst, and is that the way to go? What do you think?
I think the key about mentoring is to make sure that when you put two people together, that they are going to have a conversation which is going to be meaningful for the individual seeking the mentoring, and so sometimes it may take a little bit of preparation. It may be useful to train the people doing the mentoring, for example. Now, I'm not talking about long-winded training, but I am talking about a certain amount of online training that we could do, which would prepare our elders communities so as to be able to do, good mentoring. I'll give you a good example. The obvious thing is that when you're mentoring, one of the things that you have to be able to listen non-judgmentally. You have to be able to listen actively and non-judgmentally. It's not about telling somebody how to do something, and it's certainly not about telling you all your own war stories, all your own stories from your past, because that's just being, like an old guy, and that's fine if you're leaning against a bar and having a drink and talking about your war stories. That's fine, but that's not the same thing as being a mentor. And so I think it's really important to make sure that people understand that kind of nuance. It's an important nuance, and but if we can get people to that kind of situation, which I don't think is difficult, I think it's quite possible, then I think it would be possible to link people together and really provide help. And we've got already quite a big membership at the Elders Council. It's growing every day. And so that would be one way in which we could be supportive of members of Catalyst and people from whoever outside of Catalyst as well, who want to join the council and be part of it. So I think from that perspective, it's quite possible, Mel, to do something really useful and positive.
Good, because I think always being typical social entrepreneurs, we're always looking to the practical outcomes. I think we like to talk, but we want to do things as well. So maybe that's something we can really look at. Sorry, Andrea, you were going to say.
No, I'm just interested in the fact that when we started the Elders Council, it was so much more to do with the social enterprise community as a whole. But as both Alassane, Chantal, and Mahadi have raised, is that this is really about society and how society as a whole is reflected within the social enterprise community. So obviously our book or our movie or whatever it is we're going to use to illustrate this and to gather that wisdom is going to be very broad. And I'm just really delighted to hear from you know, this breadth of as Chris said in the first place, about different perspectives from Mahadi in Lesotho, Alassane in Ghana, Chantal in Iowa, and Adi in South Africa. You know, they're all different perspectives, but they're all talking about the same issue, that being older or elder is difficult, but there's so much to offer.
Yeah, I think that's right, and something we can definitely park in the to-do box and get on with, I think. But just moving on, there's a question in the chat there about, which I think is a good question, and one that we've talked about before, is that for younger social entrepreneurs who are starting up, should the issue of succession planning and exit strategy be there at the beginning? So I know, certainly from my own personal perspective, that the notion of an exit strategy or succession planning never entered my head at all in the first years. And yet, any business school you go to, and there are lots of books written from the business sector, that exit plan is in there, even right down to how you get your business financed in the first place, and what the exit plan is. Are you planning to float it, pass it on to your family or whatever? It's right there. Now, I think it's very interesting now as we have more of these discussions that actually within social enterprises, there should be an exit planning that's right up front. I think that's interesting. But I don't know if everybody necessarily agrees with that. What do you guys think?
Alassane, what is your work?
Yeah, hello, are you talking to me?
Yes, I wonder what is your focus of your work?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I am a professional mental health officer by profession with Ghana Health Service. I'm working with Ghana Health Service as a mental health officer, and I also have an organization called Faith Dawa Foundation. So what we do is we help to advocate against gender-based violence, whereby men or husbands or boys beat girls and women, their wives, who are dying in silence. So we are helping to advocate against gender-based violence. We are also helping to promote maternal, newborn, and child health services. And then, because I'm a mental health officer, of course, we are also into mental health activities, mental health advocacy, and then mental health programs as well. So we also help to promote quality education. Yeah, so basically, that is what I do. And I'm a bit of entrepreneur as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you the founder of your? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say Alassane is also part of the mental health collaboration at Catalyst. So so he and I meet in other places.
I'm just interested to know if you've thought about leadership or new leadership when you want to move on, when you feel it's time for you to move on. As a younger, I wonder what your view is of that.
I didn't really hear you, please. The cars were passing by, so.
Yeah, maybe I'll put it in the chat, because maybe it'll be easier for you to see it.
I think it's part of the same question I asked. It's really, should younger social entrepreneurs be thinking about succession at a very early stage? So it's the same kind of area. I mean, I'm interested in anybody else's view on this question, because I think it's kind of very relevant to the kind of ecosystem that we're trying to create here. Does anyone else have a view on this? Should we be talking about succession exit very early in the life of a social enterprise or an emerging social entrepreneur, stroke leader?
See, the problem, Mel, is that if you make your exit, your succession plan too early, so many things can change that it becomes a fairly redundant plan quite quickly. I think that's the problem. So some people hesitate to make a plan too early. My own view is, for what it's worth, is that a good succession plan probably needs to be made about a year and a half ahead of actually putting that into place, because most of the circumstances are then, available by that time to your knowledge, So I think from that perspective, that would be about right.
Then one of our other speakers, if you remember last year, Chris, she said that the moment she announced to her board that she was thinking of moving on, she became irrelevant. Everybody kind of bypassed her, and she described that as being a dead duck. So there are other ways of looking at that and how you work together to make sure that succession plan it works well with, and really just listening to everybody. It seems to be where things work. It's about people having been respected, the respect for every individual, and where it doesn't work, it's about lack of respect for olders or youngers, and particularly with Alassane, people don't respect the women that he's working with. So a lot of this is about respect.
Yeah, Al-Hassan, the question that we were asking earlier is about your own view when you get to an age where you want to leave your organization, or maybe retire in some way or another. Is that something that you will do, or would you prefer to hang on and stay in the organization? What would be your kind of preference, looking at it from the perspective of a younger person as you are now? You are obviously not going to be thinking about retiring anytime soon, but when you decide to do that, what would be your approach?
Okay, first and foremost, forgive me because I am close to the roadside, so cars are passing by and disturbing me. Please give me 1 minute.
While he's getting ready, I could just also
yes, please,
Mahadi.
I was going to ask you. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think it's important whether I don't think it's a question of whether one is ready to leave or not. At some stage, a person has to move on. But I think it's important the moment you have made a decision to move on, to start putting measures in place to make sure that the exit will not be will not impact you negatively. Like because even if you are still there, who knows how long you're going to live? Who knows whether you're going to have some health problems and someone will have to take over? It's important for an organization, I think, to have more than one person who is capable, so that at least the attitude of people, I don't think there's a lot we can do about, because you can do all the right things and people still not treat others well. But it doesn't mean because other people don't do well, we also have to be like them. But I think preparing for the exit, because we know that at some stage someone has to move on, but preparing for some exit and mentoring the people you want to leave behind to make sure that they will continue with your vision. I think it helps, so that even when you go, you don't feel like you are thrown out. And then you can also look back and see that what you have started is still going on and the way you want it. So you are the only person who can instill that while you are still there. So I think.
Do you think, though, Mahadi, that it's important for the person who's moving on to also think about their future, about, they've spent all their lives doing something for other people? Where does that leave the person who's moving on? How should we be talking about helping them think about their future and how they're going to continue to contribute, or to live well, or to feel comfortable with their lives? Do you think that's important too?
It's very important, yes. It's very important. That's why I say it's very tricky, but it's important, both for the person who is going and for the people who are staying behind, and to find a way in which the person can still be contributing towards, maybe for me, I prefer on advisory role or something, but at least the person is still attached, and the people can still feel free to go and ask for advice when they have problems, or to discuss even issues. We are faced with this issue. They know that this person started this thing, they have more knowledge than anybody else, and they had a vision when they started, and we can use this person as our reference point. So it's not like the person will be gone and forgotten, but we'll have that critical role to make sure that they still give advice and to mentor the people. So because the vision is yours, you are the best person who knows how you wanted this to work.
Yeah. Thank you, Mahadi.
Okay, so can I come in now?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank
Yes,
you.
so-
It'd be very bad to stop you. You'll be welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So if I heard you right, I think this is a dicey, a very critical question that everyone needs to think of. After retirement, what's next? I think the ultimate goal of CSOs or NGOs or entrepreneurs is we are thinking of the future. So I think there is something I am now working on, which is called transformative education. So as a CSO, you have to transform the youth. You have to transform the community. So in this case, when you are leaving for retirement, it means that because there are greater future leaders, when you leave or when you go on retirement, things will be easier. So the only thing is for you to just be at the back. When they need advice, they come to you as their mentor, as their leader. So I think now we have to work on transformative education or transformative change. So that is what I am thinking of, working towards transformative change, towards the community and then the adolescent specifically, so that we can have a better future. Because all that we are doing is to have a better future. I know of a doctor who wasn't good enough. So when he went on retirement, he went to that same hospital and they treated him badly. So whatever you do today have implication in the future. So it means that whatever we are doing, we have to, have that passion and have transformative change. So with this, when you go on retirement, things will be okay. So I think this is a little, maybe in the next minute or time, I may also have.
Okay, thank you very much for that contribution insight. I think transformative education, I think it's kind of critical, and it's a question of how we change culture and how we all have, what roles we individually have to play in that and collectively and so on. So unfortunately, as usual with our eldest sessions, the hour disappears, and believe it or not, we've come to the end of this session already. So I'd really like to thank you for your contributions. It was the three co-founders today. Normally in our webinars we have speakers, but we wanted to kind of share where we've got to and then hear your voices. So hearing your voice has been absolutely fantastic. So really, really grateful for your contributions, incredibly valuable. And there's lots of takeaways we can have with that, particularly around mentoring and discussions around succession and so on. Critical for us is a lot of information in the chat there about how you can stay in touch with us. We have regular webinars, we have regular newsletters. So please just kind of subscribe, join in, go to our website. We've got previous recordings of all our webinars and so on. So please have a listen into that. So just kind of join in as much as you can, or get in touch with us directly if you want to have a one-to-one, absolutely no problem. Also, of course, this is the first day of Catalysing Change Week, and there's lots of sessions on for the rest of the week, really interesting sessions. Have a look at that, join in, if you have the time, certainly try and make the time, because there's a lot of really, really interesting stuff going on. And so just like to say thank you from both Chris and Andrea, if you want to say a kind of final words, but thank you from me. Thank you to Catalyst, thank you to Caitlin for her work as well. And most of all, thank you to you for your contributions. But maybe a quick final word from you, Chris and Andrea. Chris.
Sure, yes, absolutely. Very much enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Caitlin and Paola, for being so supportive to us. Really appreciate that. And very much look forward to seeing everybody on the call at our normal Elders Council webinars, which you can find on the website. Love being with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrea. Over to you.
Yes, for me, this session just proves how important elders are. And I really enjoyed hearing from each of our guests. It's given me a lot to think about. So thank you so much. And thanks to all of you.
Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.